show me the way. Send me a guru every day. Get me back on track when I go astray. Enlighten me with your wisdom today. It might get weird, but that's alright. We're all just gurus helping each other through the night. Right here on Everyday Gurus. Everyday Gurus. Wake up, don't hit the snooze. You might miss Everyday Gurus. Everyday Gurus. Everyday Gurus.
Welcome everybody to Everyday Gurus podcast. This is episode 5. My name is Patrick Ecstatic. I'll be your host. And before we get started, I just want to give honor to my late co-host, Mitch Sachdev. He did pass away from brain cancer a few months ago. And it was just amazing to know him as a friend and to work with him on this podcast. And I'll be continuing it in honor of him. He was an amazing human being, and he's still with me spiritually. And Mitch, I love you, and may you be with the light. And I'm just going to pause for a moment of silence for my best friend, Mitch, who's no longer with us in the physical world, but still with us in spirit. Thank you for everything, Mitch. So I want to share a miracle briefly. Before we started recording this podcast, somebody named Ted texted me, and somebody I haven't heard from in over 6 months. And for those of you who have watched our podcast, Mitch was known for attending theater of Ted at ISU, which really opened him up to the world of improv and saying yes and daring to suck. And that was kind of the inspiration to start this whole podcast. So it was just quite a miracle that 10 minutes before I started recording this podcast, somebody named Ted texted me and said, "Hey, how you doing? What are you up to?" So I know in some way that was Mitch saying hello and that he's still with us. So just want to honor that. So my name is Patrick Ecstatic. I'll be your host going forward, and I'm an enlightened teacher, musician, and podcast host. And I may have just slipped that in there. Some of you may have been like, enlightened? What makes you enlightened? Well, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But for me, it's a path that I walk every day. Enlightenment is a path. It's not a permanent state of bliss or somebody meditating up in the Himalayas. It's somebody who is free from the suffering caused by the mind. And I'm well trained. I spent a month in India at a temple called Ekam, and I walk the path every single day of my life, and I own it. I'm comfortable with stepping into that role and saying, yes, I am enlightened, and we need more like me. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing as a teacher. And that's why I'm spreading that light in any way that I can. And one of the beautiful things about being enlightened is that I see the light in everybody. I don't see the frailties in people. I don't see the weaknesses in people. I don't judge people. I see their best selves when I'm looking at my students. I don't see somebody beneath me. I see somebody, stepping into their best selves. I see future doctors. I see future leaders of the world. I see future fathers and mothers who are living their best lives. And that's what I see in my guest today, whose name is Christian. I don't see a blind person. I see a brilliant musician, a great conversationalist, somebody who's full of hope and positivity. And my side job is a Lyft driver, and we met. He was my passenger on a Lyft ride, and there's something magical that happens in that connection between driver and passenger. There's magic that happens in that rearview mirror, and we had a great conversation that day a few weeks ago. And I invited him on this podcast because Everyday Gurus, the whole purpose of this podcast is that everybody is a teacher. Everybody reflects something to us within ourselves that we need to learn, that we need to know and can grow from. And so part of my mission for this podcast is to bring those people to light, bring everyday people who have so much to offer, who are so insightful and can teach us so much about ourselves and inspire us in their own unique ways. And that's why I have Christian on here today. And enough about me and our podcast. I would just love for Christian to take the opportunity to introduce himself. So Christian, thank you so much for coming on today. Welcome, welcome. And please take a moment to introduce yourself.
For sure. I appreciate you, Patrick. And I want to offer my condolences for your co-host, Mitch. Sound like a beautiful person. Absolutely. So as Patrick said, my name is Christian. I am blind, but I don't really think that's, a part of who I am. I'm a musician. I am a son. I'm a brother. And I feel like I'm an explorer of life. That's the most important thing to me and where I am in my place in life right now. Because I'm 25 and I'm looking for, who I am in a spiritual sense, who I am in a role as a career, in a role as a family member. And it's, that exploring myself all started with my wife. She showed me a life that I had dreamed about and thought about, but in a very different way. She showed me love and humility in a way that I'd never experienced. And after losing her recently, in the last about 8 months now, it's just taught me so much about life and loving and community and truly being a human, what humanity is. And I just want to explore that and encourage in people to, express their humanity in loving their family and embracing their community and embracing themselves, because we're all human because of our individualities and our similarities. And I've really just learned that about myself and about the world, and I'm just trying to explore it. So I guess that's who I am.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Christian.
Of course.
So yeah, I would love to start there. If you can tell me a little bit more about your late wife and how she inspired you, and what the process was for you for accepting what happened with her.
Of course, yeah. So my wife, we met in high school. It was my senior year of high school, essentially her junior year, and just meeting her. Initially it was a like any other high school meeting. It was quick, and it was like the fast romance, but we never knew what it. I'm going to say I didn't know. My wife, Gretel Margarita Arianes, I just want to make sure I said her full name. She was from Mexico, and she had so much life experience because of her circumstances. And it made her, and her family and community made her into this beautiful, humble person who embraced all forms of life. And she was born with retinoblastoma, which is cancer in the eyes. And so as a child, when she was diagnosed with that, she would go back and forth from Mexico to Los Angeles, working with the cancer center there at UCLA. And she ended up getting her eyes removed and had artificial eyes. And most people going through that circumstance, especially coming from Mexico, not having those resources, would not necessarily experience the same life that we have here in the United States with the resources from the government and technology and those things. But Gretel was never held back by that. And she was just like any other kid growing up. Her parents really, and her family really allowed her to be a child who explored the world and learned and got hurt and fell. And it's it's very rare, I feel like, to see that with blind children. As long as I've been blind, it's hard for parents to let their child go out in the world in the first place. But then when
I'm sure.
Yeah, and when they're blind, it's even more, because now you're scared. They can't see anything, and the world.
You think you got to be your eyes for them.
Exactly. And the world is not always kind. It's not when you're not what people would say is normal or abled or whatever words you want to use. And I feel like an important part of teaching the world is you have to be confident in yourself, and you have to have the skills and the knowledge to be able to advocate for yourself and teach
Absolutely.
people. Yeah, and and here in the United States, they have a lot of resources for blind people to get training in what we call non-visual techniques, to learn how to cook and manage a household and use the technology. Like on my laptop and my phone, it has screen reader technology, which allows me to order my lifts and search the internet and hop on our call here and such. So,
nice.
And depending on the country you come from, they don't have those same resources.
Mm-hmm.
So her coming from Mexico, she decided when she was 16, 17 that she would move to the United States to finish school so she could get that training. And I know who I was at 15, 16. I would never, ever have that courage, have the forethought to even decide something like that. And when she told me that in the first meeting her, I knew that she was more than just, a 17-year-old girl. She was so kind, she was so smart, and she wanted more for her life and her family, and so she took it upon herself, and that was so inspiring. And
Lovely.
then from the initial meeting, she affected me, and we ended up like breaking up, and I would always think to myself, always, like, she's the one that got away. That was always my thought that was 2016 or so. And we were still talking over the past 6 years, but it was off and on. We both lived our own lives, etc. And then I never had someone be so upfront. And she told me, I had been telling you how much I loved you since we were 17. And I don't want to go through this anymore. So unless you want to give us a chance, like, I have to say goodbye. And I had never had anyone in my life be so honest and vulnerable and upfront with me.
Yeah, wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and I knew that since I was 17, I've been thinking, like, she got away. Never got this chance. We could have, because we only really met. We only were in high school for about 6 months before I graduated. So we never really got the chance to know each other. And then I went to college and etc. So she told me that, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna, you're right. Because, the thing is, she had told me she loved me for so many years. And being 18, 19, 20, I didn't know what it meant. Like, I really did. You really don't know what love is until someone shows it to you. Yeah. And until they demonstrate, because everyone, I feel like love is I don't know, it's like a toss up word sometimes, just to,
for sure,
people just say, I love this person. And you might not even know that person. It's just because they're a good person, have good character. But when we truly love someone, whether it's a partner, your family, it's because I feel like you know what you mean to them and what they mean to you, and what you're both willing to do and go through with each other and for each other and sacrifice.
Absolutely. And there's that deep connection where you bring out the light in each other, and you just know.
Exactly. And I feel like the biggest thing that shows you what it like when you connect with another person is when, without saying it, without a conversation, you make each other want to be better for each other, to be able to together in collaboration, like, be better in the world and make the world better, like that. what the feeling of love, I feel like, makes you so uh it's like dreamlike, because you're like, with this
Yes.
person, I can do anything. It doesn't matter.
Yes. And without
Yeah.
words, I love how you emphasize that without even
Yeah.
speaking words. You just have that feeling, you have that drive, you have
Yeah.
that I want to show up as my best self for you, and
Exactly. Yeah.
you light me up.
Yeah, exactly. And that in motivation, encouragement was, I had never experienced anything like it, truly. From the time, we essentially started dating in April of 22. And from that time, it was like everything about her made me want to be a better person, made me want to be successful. And at that time, I thought that meant, like, wealthy and powerful and whatever
Mm,
those, I feel like, stereotypical kind of this is success
for
ideas
sure.
of success. And within 3 months, I knew I wanted to marry this woman. I could not let her leave. I could
That's
lose
beautiful.
her.
So we're talking 3 months from that time where she made herself vulnerable and said, "Let's give us a chance." 3 months later, you pop the question.
So told me that in December of 21. Is that right? Yeah, December 21. April of 22, because she told me, like, are you going to ask me? Are you going to tell me you want to be with me? Because we were just talking. And she was like, but you never really asked me. You have to ask me. And that, again, was like, I don't know why, but that meant a lot to me, that she was like, we're not just going to date. If you want to be with me, you need to tell me. And that meant a lot to me. And, like, I really respect and admire straightforward honesty,
Yes,
because yeah, and I feel like people kind of use that as an excuse to kind of be critical and judgmental, and like, well, I'm just honest. And I was like, I don't. That's not honesty. Honesty is vulnerability.
for
Whether
sure.
it's asking for someone to be vulnerable or you're being vulnerable, that's, I truly feel like, is what it means to be honest.
Yep, and I think we need a lot more of that in relationships,
Yeah,
especially romantic partnerships, as there's
yeah,
still a lot of game playing, which is it's fun
yes,
for the
yeah,
courting process, but it gets nasty with the games and people get confused, and I
yeah,
don't think people should mess with each other's feelings the way that they do. I have no problem with very direct communication, and
exactly.
some people might say, oh, well, that takes all the fun out of the courting process. Well,
Yeah,
I disagree. All right. I think there's still plenty of fun to be had if it's truly
exactly.
love and you're truly
Yeah,
showing up to be in each other's best interest for not only
yeah,
your own personal interest, but also the best interests of the world. Like that's the type of relationship I'm looking for, is one that's not just good for me and the other person, but also good for the world. Maybe we do some spiritual work together and start a community together, stuff like that. That's part of my vision for a romantic relationship. It needs to be good for the whole, not just for me, not
yeah,
just for one other person.
absolutely.
And it sounds like that's something that you found, and that's very beautiful
Yes,
to me.
absolutely. And which what you said, I feel like, is something eventually people start to like, oh, I don't want to just date to date. I want to date to build something, to create a partnership. And you will learn that eventually. Like, I feel like we always have these people will always tell you, like, 30, 35 is when you want to settle down, but I feel like I have now at 25, and any sense of future relationships, I now understand, like, I don't want to date. There's no one to me, it feels like there's no reason to
Mm,
just date a person. I feel like the honesty that comes with, like, I want to be a husband. I want to be a partnership and build together. I think that is should be part of, like, courting, or we should be with all of the dating apps and stuff like that. Feel like it's created this idea of the game,
mhm.
numbers or whatever it is. Um, and it really, I don't know, it feels so ingenuine and authentic, like we're all just putting on some type of caricature.
For sure. And there's a lot of fake profiles out there and
Yeah,
outdated profiles. And yeah, it leads
yeah,
to a lot of distrust and just
yeah,
wasted time. Wasted time.
right,
I've been on dates on those dating sites where I'm like, this person looks nothing like what they look like in their photo, but I'm just gonna
Yeah.
see this date through just to be nice, and I gave up on the whole online dating thing. There's too much, like you said, lack of authenticity, and it's just a waste of time. It's a waste of money, and it's not what I'm looking for. I can find what I'm looking for in the real world, where I can sense who that person is, not just read their details and see a picture that might be 5 years old or might be somebody else entirely. So I've kind of written that off.
Yeah, and even in like their hobbies and stuff, I feel like there's key terms people can use that kind of piques your interest, and you're like, then you talk to them and they're like, "Oh, so you don't really like reading?" Like you just put that on there because, you know.
That's true. The inauthenticity comes up in many different ways, not just in the photographs.
You kind of can quickly learn like, oh, so this is not who you are at all. But
so you lied to me in approximately 35 ways. Okay.
Yeah, 225
before I even met you. That's a great foundation for a healthy relationship. Let's get hitched, and our relationship will be based on a great foundation of trust.
Yeah. So it's difficult, especially if you know what you want. And I felt like that's why I was like, I cannot lose her, not again. I won't. And so I proposed. Funnily enough, it wasn't even like we didn't have a conversation. Do you want to get married? It was like we were sitting there one day in July, and she was like, I don't know. I think she said like, I'd marry you right now. And I was like, yeah, you want to? And she was like, yeah. So I was like, all right, guess we're doing it. And she was like, are you serious? I'm serious. And then I bought a ring, and we went to Disneyland with her family in September, and I proposed in front of the Disney castle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a happy place for me. So that definitely resonates.
Absolutely. All of it goes to her sister, Nancy. Nancy, it was Gretel's hero, and she was her older sister. She lives in Reno, and she set it all up. I didn't even know we were going in front of the Disney castle. It was just I bought the ring. She took it from me so she could hide it, and then she gave it back to me. And I was like, "Oh, we're doing this?" She's like, "We're doing it." And then she started the video. And I was like, "Okay." And I really love it because that's really that's my vibe. I'm the most calm, nonchalant person. So I was like, this is totally. Anyone who knows me thinks it's hilarious. I propose in front of Disney Castle just because I'm pretty indifferent about Disney. I love Disney movies and shows, sure, but I was just like, I don't know. Like it seems so storybook romantic, but I wouldn't have picked it necessarily. But it was amazing. We got the video, did everything, and we got married. Hilariously enough, both of us were like, I don't want to make a big deal out of it. And we just got married in the park across the street from our apartment with a local minister, and just did it real nonchalant. That was very much both of us, humble. It was just that we just wanted it to be about us.
Nice. Did you have your families there too?
Yeah. So unfortunately, her brother and sisters couldn't make it because it was so we literally did it in a matter of a week or two. But her parents were there, and my mom and brothers were there. And we actually planned on the following year doing like a bigger party so all of our families could be there. But so what happened is about 3 or 4 months after we got married, it was in October 15th. After we got married, she had like lumps on her shoulder, and when she went to the hospital to get it looked at, they told her they wanted to do an MRI because she had a retinoblastoma, and there's a number of, I don't know what a percentage of people who it does come back, and I believe it's very high. So they found I don't know what you would call them, forms, I guess, on her lungs, on both of her lungs. And they wanted to immediately start radiation and chemo. So they did the chemo first, and that started in June of 23. And so I worked for about 2 weeks through in June. I had started a new job and I worked there for 6 months. And then about 2 weeks into June, I decided I didn't want to keep going back and forth and be apart. So I just moved to Mexico with her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, because that's where she was being treated. And so I lived with my in-laws at her family home that she had lived in since she was born. Well, actually, I think they'd had that house for much even longer than that. But it's in Sonora, in a little town called Quince de Septiembre, which is September 15th, which is it was to honor a battle that happened in that town. And it's that living there for 6 months is what started it. I had already known her, and then living there, I saw how she was the person she was because of her community, because of this humble life. My father-in-law, he's a fisherman, and they have had money troubles essentially her entire life because it's a hard life catching fish and just selling it. Especially, with all the commercial fishing and stuff, it's very difficult.
Oh, sure.
To maintain. Yeah. But if anyone met Gretel, she was the most happiest, biggest smile, most beautiful laugh. She would tease anyone. And throughout this entire time, 4 or 5 months, 5 months in total of her getting the chemo, it never waned. She was always laughing, always smiling, and it was the happiest I'd ever been because I was with her in my life. And it's so hard to say that because of what we were going through and watching her be sick and her body in pain. But I was so happy because all we did was love each other. It's a 2-room house that only has air conditioning in the bedrooms. So during the summer, we spent most of the time in the room. We would download movies on Netflix or play cards, listen to music. And you would think, I didn't even have access to Wi-Fi barely. And you would think that I would be griping the whole time. But truly, it was boring. Don't get me wrong. She was bored. I was bored. We talked about it all the time. But truly, I was so happy just to be with her and sit in the mornings, drink coffee with my mother-in-law and her outside. And they had this beautiful big garden with fruit trees and all the birds. And it was just this amazing, humbling experience because I realized after everything I experienced, the reason why I was happy is because I was so loved, not only by my wife, but by her family. They accepted me. They loved me. They loved me. They still do. And taught me so much that I really was not aware of until after my wife had passed. And I had never experienced the grief that I experienced when she passed before in my life. And that taught me so much about being grateful and appreciating the people who are here, because truly what I have started to feel like I understand is that life is very difficult. And what makes it easier, what makes us happy is loving each other and 100%. Loving life, and appreciating each other and those around us and being grateful because everything else is so hard. Just being grateful that we have these people around us in our community and that you can wake up every day, the small things, And that's what my life was in Mexico, is appreciating the small things. That's
an extremely powerful perspective, and thank you for sharing that. And can you tell me a little bit about the grieving process? Because, I mean, you didn't just go from she passed away, oh, I'm so grateful. I mean, surely there was a period of like deep hurt and maybe some anger
Absolutely.
there. Can you tell me
Yeah.
what that felt like and how you were able to transmute that into something so beautiful and this gratitude and appreciation for her?
Absolutely. So, so she passed away, um, I believe it was the night of November 5th. I was here in Phoenix because I had doctor's appointments because hadn't worked that entire time. So I was trying to get a job and, up because we were expecting to finish her chemo and then come back to the United States, get her paperwork process started, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just trying to get all that prepared, and she passed away. My sister-in-law called me, um, and I felt so guilty that I was in Phoenix. I felt so guilty and ashamed that I was in Phoenix. And my brother-in-law, he came and picked me up, and we drove back to Mexico. No, I apologize. I took the shuttle to Rocky Point,
Mm-hmm.
and he picked me up from the shuttle station in Mexico. And I was in shock the entire day, driving to Mexico because she passed around 11:30 midnight on that night. And so I went to Mexico the next morning, and I'm just in shock the whole time. I got to go through this. And I've been taking the shuttle for months. Anytime I had to come back to Phoenix, I would take the shuttle. And so, like, it just all felt like how fast, how quickly life goes. And from the fact of 24 hours before, I was just talking to her, and we were just voice messaging on WhatsApp. I'm letting her know I'm coming back tomorrow. My queen, I love you. How you feeling, etc. And then that evening, she passed away. I'm back on the shuttle going back to Mexico, just like any other time. But now it's for her funeral. And it's like, what? I mean, I'm totally in shock. And we get there, and we don't get there till the evening because of just et cetera, everything. And in Mexico, what they do is they prepare the body, and then they lay them out, and they do a vigil overnight. And so her family is there, and her family is very well known in Sonora, in the state. And so hundreds of people are showing up, and I am in shock. Like, I can't even sit out there with everyone because I didn't know I didn't know what to do. I felt guilty, and not a lot of people spoke English, so I couldn't talk to anyone. I could. My brother-in-law spoke English, but I just didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And so I sat in the room, her bedroom, the same room we had been spending every single day in, and just cried all night. And at one point, I remember, and I don't know if I fell asleep or if I was just disassociating, but I remember sitting there, and I couldn't hear anything outside anymore, which was very crazy. It's a very small house. You can hear everything, and I couldn't hear anything. And I remember feeling a touch on my face. No one else is in the room. And I feel a touch on my face, and I hear my wife say, "It's okay. You got to let me go. I'm happy. I'm okay." And I don't know what else to do. I just keep crying. And as the morning comes around, I remember hearing her laugh before I got up, started getting ready because they're going to do the service. And I remember hearing her laugh and her saying, like, I'm going to go. And I we did the service, and it was, again, like I remember everything, but it was just passing. Everything's going by, going by. And my in-laws, they want me to stay in Mexico, and they asked me, "Do you want to stay or do you want back to Phoenix?" Because
Mm-hmm.
my mother-in-law, her brother was driving back. He lived in Casa Grande, and so
I see.
he could take me back. And I knew if I stayed there, like I would drown. I couldn't stay there because it was everything that we had was there. Like that's where I felt like our love was. And so I had, I have never ever been a emotionally intelligent person in the sense of my own emotions. I didn't know how to deal with them. I've always been very suppressive of them. So I naturally I ran away. So I didn't want to stay. And
Absolutely.
I am, you know, and this is, I feel like, such an interesting part of it is I am so obviously sad and grieving that I'm not even considering the fact that any other time I would never cry in front of people. But it didn't even matter. It didn't even pass my mind. I'm crying the entire time. In front, I cried the night she passed. I was at a family friend's house with my mom and brother and her friends, and we're all there. I cried in front of them, and I never even passed my mind. And I was just in this very deep depression for months. I really didn't remember much of that time. I didn't remember like Thanksgiving, Christmas. I didn't remember much of it until like a probably February of this year because she passed in November of 23.
Mm-hmm.
And so December, January, like February mostly until beginning of March or so, because I started a new job in February. And so it just kind of, once I felt like, okay, I'm a little bit back in a routine, is when I started thinking about it more. And I didn't, and still, until I started thinking about it, is when I started to understand, even though I was so angry, so mad at myself. I was mad at, she had had a cough for months, and we would tell the doctor, and they said she was fine. And I
Mm.
knew she wasn't. And I knew she wasn't. She was coughing. She couldn't breathe for the last month, essentially. And I knew she wasn't okay. But she, we had a conversation several times over those 6 months, and she would tell me, "I'm only doing this because you're here with me. If you weren't here, I wouldn't do this. I don't want to be like this." She didn't want to be weak, and she hated it. She hated every moment of it. And
She was fighting for you,
she
she
was
said.
fighting for me, yeah.
Mm.
And we would, we would talk, and she would tell me all the time that, we're strong together, and because we're together, she's gonna make it through. And I told her, probably beginning of October, she said she doesn't want to do it anymore. She doesn't want to get radiation, even if it's not gone. And for so long, I would tell her, you gotta fight. I'm here. We're gonna make it through. But I knew Gretel, and she told me, when she told me she didn't want to do it anymore, I told her, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever told her. But I told her, it's okay. If you don't want to do this anymore, you don't have to. I'm still right here. Well, we can stay here in Mexico. We can go back to the US, and we're going to be together. It doesn't matter. And I truly think me letting her know that no matter what happens, I'm here, let her know she didn't have to fight anymore if she didn't want to. I truly think that. And I know that she was the most stubborn person you would ever meet. So her wanting to be in this world was her choice, and her wanting to leave this world was her choice. And I know that. And she, when I, around March of this year, I would, started playing guitar more. Over the past couple years, I'd been playing, but not a lot, just picking it up every now and then. But this year, I actually started really focusing on music because it was one of our biggest connections. We would listen to music every day and sing and rap songs together. And she really just encouraged me to do anything. She was the most supportive person, an encouraging person. And she taught me so much about just believing and support. And, I never really wanted to necessarily do music as a career because I'm a very pragmatic person. I was like, well, that's the dream, but it's not can I really be successful and pay the bills, etc. So I was like,
I can relate.
Realistic. Yeah. So, but I love music with all my heart. And the thing that made me present-minded, where I could just think about one thing, whether it be sad or happy, was music. It allowed me to focus. And so that's what it started as a way just to not just be sad, not just be in my head all the time, is what music started as. And then I had one night, I went to a blues jam and it was incredible. I played a song that I wrote for her, and it wasn't the audience, it was just the energy of playing and the energy of expressing felt so good that I knew that when I became famous, whatever it was, I needed to not stop playing guitar. I could not stop playing guitar because it felt like a spiritual moment every time I played.
I can relate as well.
Yeah. It feels so, and I tell people now, like, when I would talk to Gretel, she was a little bit of a different personality in Spanish. When she would speak with her friends and stuff and her family, she was a little bit different. She was fiery and loud, and I feel like in music, when you're playing with other people, you express another personality almost. Like you get to speak that language with those people, and everyone else gets to see it. Like, and it's hard to explain, but I think you get it.
Totally. The collaborative process is very beautiful and brings out different expressions. That's what I love about jamming with others, is it totally brings out a totally different side musically. And the key that I've found is not listening to myself, but listening to others, and then just letting it flow naturally. It's like a connection and a groove that you experience, a collective groove that is indescribable. And that's why musicians, do what they do and fall in love with it.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a small part of it, but it was a huge stepping stone in healing for me, because I felt like no matter what, if I continue to learn music and develop my skill, that is going to be like that my wife would be supporting me. That's something I knew she always, anytime I told her, like, we should do this, I want to do this, and she was like, do it. That was her answer. Yeah, you can do it. And I was like, I felt like no one had ever been so just genuinely excited for me and supportive without question. And she also was incredibly smarter than me. So when I would do something, I could ask her, and she was like, well, I think this is a better choice. And I learned to listen to her because she affected me in this way that truly changed. Like, it clicked a switch in me that made me feel like spiritually, mentally, intellectually just heightened because of her support. And like the knowing like, oh, I'm a husband now, this is my wife and this is my forever, it hit a switch in me. Like it changed me as a person. And losing her, I thought in the beginning was going to like everything, I felt like I had from her. And at that time, I didn't know what it was fully. I thought like, I'm just going to like, it's over. I'm going to fail in life now because she was my everything. And now I know she's always with me. It sounds crazy, but I truly do believe that she reaches out to me.
Yeah, no, I get it. I feel Mitch all the time too. And
absolutely. Yeah,
that was
exactly.
the
Just
first
like you said
experience
about
I've had
the text.
Yep. The first experience I've had with somebody that close to me of dying. And I went through that grieving process too of, like denial, like, oh, I just talked to him last week and we were doing this podcast. Like this can't be, even though he had brain cancer, like we thought it was going to get better. Like I had faith that he was going to live and we were going to, have the successful podcast together. And there was that denial and then that anger and like, no, and he can't be gone. But now it's just like pure gratitude for the friendship that we had. Like he showed me what true friendship was on a totally different level, and kind of along the lines of like how Gretel inspired the best in you. Mitch really brought out the best in me, and like was one of the first people to like really say like, let it be about you, man. It's your life. Do what you want, and like years ago when I was wrestling with like, I trying to be the ideal self and like be this super spiritual person and, have austerities and cut things out of my life, he'd be like, who's telling you to do that? Live the life that you want to live. And he would empower me to just like be free, not follow any sort of religion or any specific path, but just like follow my own intuition. And he was so amazing to work with, because I would sometimes take longer to edit a podcast than we expected. And I'd be like, sorry, man, I just haven't been excited about it and I've been putting it off. And he'd be like, don't worry about it, man. If you're not lit up about it, don't bother. Don't do it. I'd rather you be excited to do it and do it from a place of joy than obligation. And he was just so supportive and just such an amazing friend and coworker that he just inspires me every day to this day. And I can still hear his voice and words of wisdom and just love him. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like we really, we always say learn from others. And then when you finally realize that person who like one of the first people who taught you something in a real impactful way, it really, it's a very surreal moment. Like, wow, this is who I learned this from. They have taught me this and it's made me better. And it really makes you so, just like you said, the gratitude for the relationship, for the love, for everything she taught me is what makes me feel okay, is because I know that what we had, truly, some people don't have the blessing to experience it. Even though it was only 11 months that we were married, and it taught me truly how to be a person, I feel like, and help to be ready to explore who I want to be, because these are the things that are important to me. And that is what keeps me going. What motivates me is that I experienced her, that I had the honor to experience her. And I'm so grateful and appreciative. And whatever I want to do in life, whatever I end up doing, if I'm happy and appreciative, then I know that I'm doing what she wanted. I know she's supporting me in that. And 100%. That makes me so happy. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much, Christian. So yeah, you seem to be in a very good space now. And tell me about some of the recent successes that you've had. You shared before we started recording that you just got a new opportunity. Would you like to share that?
Yeah, for sure. So I got chosen to do a little speaking engagement for my job.
Nice.
On a national level. It'll be a live stream thing for our department. So that's very exciting. And actually, you know, part of that is they're asking me like how I made it to the company. And I told her, you know, a lot of the story about my wife. And it's a week before my wife's birthday that I'll be doing that presentation. And I always knew no matter what, the world needs to know about this beautiful person. And I feel like this is such a full circle moment that I get to speak on my journey to the company and how that all that happened because of my wife a week before her birthday. Like that to me is such a huge moment. And like I don't know, I never even and it was very random because they just asked like, would you mind speaking about, you know, your journey to the company and et cetera. And I was like, oh, of course. And then it was just days later, they're like, so we're going to have you speak at national engagement. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's not what I thought this was.
That's
So,
phenomenal. Wow. National
yeah.
engagement. So what kind of company is it?
I work for Synchrony Bank.
Okay.
So they
Awesome.
do, yeah, they do, you know, do a lot of credit cards and such like that,
Yeah.
loans and stuff. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the speaking opportunity.
I
That's such a
appreciate it.
wonderful thing for you to be able to talk about your journey as well as your wife and how she inspired you. What a great way to honor her.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I think it really, I want to be able to tell her story, whether it was through music or through speaking. And I'm excited that I just realized that like yesterday, the day before, it's like, oh, that's a week before her birthday. I don't know how that happened, but that's the universe, you know?
Yeah. Love that synchronicity.
Yeah.
Um, so you had also mentioned being accepted into a program. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to be doing a cybersecurity certification program that starts in
Nice.
August for, I'll be getting CompTIA certifications in Network Plus and Security Plus. So that's something I've always wanted to do. And I just never thought out, honestly, and kind of the same thing with guitar. It's very, it's a very simple revelation, but it's a big deal to me. I
Uh-huh.
never thought I was very good at like computer stuff because it wasn't a natural thing for me. Just like guitar, I'd have friends who could like not know a chord or anything and they could make something musical. And I was just like, so I guess like maybe I'm not a musical person. And then I was just like, well, I also don't practice. And I like just totally, it started clicking like, oh, practicing does make you better. Like
Who'd have thunk it?
yeah. So, so that was, and the thing with this cybersecurity, like, oh, if I don't learn anything, I'm not going to be able to do something. So that's why I say, like, I feel like I'm an explorer of knowledge and people in the world because I just want to learn. I've always, so it was so hard for me to choose what I wanted to do in university because I was like, but I'm also interested in this and this and this and this. So I love the fact that uh, just the circumstances of life have gotten to live in Mexico, have gotten to meet people from different walks of life. Playing music, you meet so many different people, and now I get to do cybersecurity and explore that something in that world. And I just love to explore. So whatever I get to, you know, you inviting me here on the podcast, all started because we were talking about your organization and like I'm just interested.
Right,
I'm always
ACOM.
interested.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It sounds like you're living in these states of gratitude and inspired, and the universal intelligence is rewarding you with all these opportunities. And I'm just so happy to see you because you're such a bright light, and just love listening to you speak about your journey. Very inspiring story.
Thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit more about guitar because that's one of the things that really resonated when we were talking on our Lyft ride a couple weeks ago. Is you gave me some of the best advice that I've ever gotten from a fellow musician. Is I was talking about how, you know, I've been kind of stuck in my soloing journey, you know, like playing the Mixolydian scale and you know, feeling like there wasn't much growth in that department. And you gave me a great practicing tip. You know, there's that P word again, practice. It does actually help.
Yeah,
And
it does.
you said one of the things that you do is you stick with the same lick. You play the same lick over and over, but you try to play it in different ways, with like different articulation, different dynamics, and that's been a way to evolve your soloing abilities. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. That I get so excited talking about guitar. Yeah, learning, because what brought that on is I loved, since I was a kid, I've loved, which sounds hilarious because I'm 25, I love blues music, like Electric Chicago blues and Delta blues. And if you don't know, you don't know. And so until I had an instructor who explained to me, a lot of blues music is all created from the same place on the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the same 6 notes, like within the pentatonic scale. It's the same little square, ideally. It's like the greats, B.B. King is playing these same, what they call the B.B. box, is like maybe 8 different notes, but he was so incredible at the phrasing, the dynamic, the timing, the articulation, the tone, that you would never. I listen to the music all the time and I'm like, man, I could never. Now that I play and I have a little bit of ear training, I'm like, oh, these are the same. It's all the same place. It's all the same lick, just done in a little bit different way. You stop on this note instead of this note, or you do it very loud, crescendo, and then next you'll do it softly. I forget what the opposite term of that is.
Decrescendo.
Yeah. So that taught me so much about just learning the mechanics of the music. Taught me that it's not necessarily as complicated, because when you hear it as especially when you don't play, you listen to music and it sounds so elaborate. And not to say that it's not, but the elaborate doesn't always come from the technical skill. It comes more from the sonic of it, how it sounds.
Well said.
And just like you were saying about like listening when you're jamming, that is like a huge part of my practice, is just listen. If I want to learn a song, I literally listen to that song all day, over and over and over and over again. And my kind of go-to is to learn the most recognizable lick in that song, or usually in most of the time it's like a riff with a little bit something extra added that they play. And so once you learn the main riff, the main lick of a song, everything else is just fun, like, especially like when you want to learn a song because you're jamming or gigging or something like that. Ideally, I feel like music is supposed to be your creation. And so I really try to focus on, I want to learn the song so it's recognizable based off of the tune I'm playing, but I want to express this song in my way. And so I focus on what makes this song. Okay, it's this melody. Okay, this chord progression. Now everything else, how am I going to make this sound how I want it to sound? And whether sometimes that's just playing the same thing over and over again, softly, louder, softly, louder. And that also helps you, for me, especially because I'm blind, muscle memory is everything. I mean, I thought most guitarists were playing without looking realistically, but a lot of people look too.
Oh, yeah.
Once you're playing the same thing over and over and over and over again, your hands will just do it. And then you don't have to look. In my case, I can't. So that's really what it started, is to learn a pentatonic, to learn mixolydian, any scale. I have to do it hundreds of times. And then you just start breaking it down. Okay, I like how this little part sounds. Let me do that 100 times. What if I do it in a different key? What if I do it higher up the neck? And just doing the same thing in different intonations, different positions, but trying to make it the same lick, so that and for those who are maybe not guitar players or musical, like a lick is essentially just the collection of notes.
Hmm.
So if we know that we're playing the same notes, whether like if I'm saying like, you know, a D, like an A minor pentatonic, if I'm playing like a D, and then a C and an E, right? If I play those three notes in a lick, okay, let me go up to fifth position up by the 12th fret and try to do it again. And it also helps you to learn mastering your fretboard. I know that's something I feel like we don't talk about a lot, is memorizing the fretboard, because it's a lot easier to memorize shapes of your scales and your chord shapes and stuff. But if
For
you
sure.
can memorize the fretboard, I feel like up to 15 fret on the 15th fret on every string,
Do you mean like
automatically.
which notes are on which fret?
Yep, exactly. So if you
Hmm.
can go uh like starting with your F, like if you're in standard tuning, starting with your low E string on that F note first fret, if you
Hmm.
can go uh from there and then name every single note as you go down. Well, that would be obviously too easy because it's in order. So how I like to practice is by doing and I don't even necessarily do it in a scale. I'll just three fingers on the top string with at least three notes. Doom, doom, doom. F, G, A with at least three notes. A flat, C, D with at least three notes. So I'm just going down, up and down starting on different places and trying to make sure I can name that note. And the bigger challenge is try to do it based off of sound rather than counting. But until you know it, you'll have to count it. And a great uh, anchor is do it from a note you always can recognize, which for
Mm.
most guitar players is E, because
Yeah,
that's your low E and your high E. So we can hear that pretty clearly.
for sure.
So you start on your seventh fret, fifth string or A string, that's always going to be your E. Now try to name the notes down the rest of the fret. Because most people know all the notes up to like 5 or 6, 7, because you're open chords. It's pretty standard, I feel like. Um, and then I feel like once you get past like 9 is when we're like, oh, I know where most of the roots are, but not exactly. And I don't know where all the halves are. But if you learn those, it really breaks open your soloing. Because now, no matter where you're on the neck, you know if you hit the root, the notes around your root, whether minor or major, are gonna be there. So you can solo
Yes.
anywhere. You can make those licks anywhere, long as you know where the note is.
Yes, that's a pro tip. Wow. I appreciate that. And I'm sure a lot of other guitar players watching this do. And are you teaching music now?
So I just started volunteering at the Foundation for Blind Children to
Oh,
teach for their summer program. So they do like a summer program for high school students for do some work experience or college preparation. And I teach. I did started volunteering there just once a week. I'd never had any experience teaching guitar, and I was like, I don't know. I guess I feel like I need to be a very I don't even like to say master anymore,
uh-huh.
because I like in my life experience I've done like martial arts and all different disciplines of music and martial arts, and I've met professionals, and I feel like the most common theme is like, oh, I'm still learning. Everyone can learn something. So how do we don't master anything. I
Forever a
feel like,
student. That's my
yeah,
approach of everything
100%.
in life.
Yeah, so I thought I just needed to be more skilled to be an instructor, but then I was like, I mean, if they don't know how to play guitar, I can teach you how to play guitar. So I can definitely, especially ideally, I'd like to work with newer students, because I'd like, I want to really help people to learn. My goal as an instructor is to make you feel encouraged to keep going, even if I can't keep teaching it, because that is what made me fall in love with playing music, is that I want to be able to do that. How do I learn that? And then figure out how to learn it. whether it's with
That's
an instructor.
powerful, man. And that's
Yeah.
inspiring words for me as a teacher, and I love that. Can you talk about some practical ways to inspire that in somebody?
Yeah, for sure. I think I feel like what has always inspired me that I try to pass on is piquing someone's interest. Like, what
Mm,
about this interests you? What about guitar?
mhm,
What do you want to be able to do? Or what do you like to watch people do? What do you like to hear?
mhm.
And I feel like that kind of applies to anything we're learning. Why do I want to learn this? And that kind of guides your learning in the sense of if you just want to learn because you want the knowledge, that is totally okay. But you're not going to learn the same way as someone who wants to be proficient and maybe do this as a profession. So it's just you're going to learn a little bit differently. Maybe it's not as in depth of a education because you just want to increase knowledge, or maybe it's a specific concept. And I feel like as a in guitarist or as a musician in general, you have to know what your goals are. If they're
Uh-huh.
like, I want to be able to be a lead guitarist, okay, you need to learn your scales. You need to learn your theory in the sense of where's your roots, where's your thirds, where's your fifths, so that you can make those leads. If you want to be a
Yeah.
rhythm guitarist, okay, you need to learn your chords and your chord inversions so you can play the chords anywhere. If you want to be a guitarist, which I feel like, are different things. If you want to be a guitarist, I feel like that means you have a broad spectrum of skills, whether it's a
Yeah.
lead, whether it's rhythm playing, whether it's just, adding expressions to a song, whatever it is. And you need to, as a instructor, like, I want you to be a well-rounded person. So let's start with what are your interests and build from there. If you like, oh, I love this kind of music. Okay. So let's learn what are the core mechanics of that music and go from there. If
Yeah.
it's, metal or something like that, okay, you need to learn what your core mechanics, power chords
Uh-huh.
and inversed, augmented. Okay, let's learn those. With
Yeah.
like blues and jazz, like I don't know much about jazz at all, but I feel like uh, I'm building my education in blues music and building my skills simultaneously so
Uh-huh.
that I can be well rounded in
Yeah.
blues.
I think that's a beautiful approach as
Yeah.
a teacher to really find what lights up your student, what really brings out
Yes.
that
Yeah.
bliss, and then make it more laser focused, and what are
Yeah.
your goals, what are your intentions, and start there, instead of like trying to
Yeah.
impose something on them. You can't teach somebody passion,
Exactly.
but you can
Yeah.
really like nurture somebody's inner passion and help bring it out.
Exactly. Yeah, because if you're passionate and you actually want to do it, I mean, I feel like that's what we all learned from high school, middle school. If you actually want to do it, you're going to do it.
Uh-huh.
If you don't want to do it, you're not going to do it. Even if you have to
Yeah.
show up to guitar class, have to show up to whatever it is,
Yeah.
you're never going to progress because you don't want to.
Right. And that's so much of our conditioning. So much of our time is spent waiting for someone to tell us what to do. What do we need to do to
Yes.
get through the
Yeah.
day? What do we need to do to be
Yeah.
accepted in society? So I think people forget to even look for that bliss, look for what
Yeah.
lights me up. What do I want? People forget to
Yeah.
even look inside. And
Yeah.
taking time to do that is super important. And I think music is one of the most powerful forms of creativity to bring that out in people, bring out that joy, that childlike joy that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
unfortunately lose sight of, as we get older, because we get so caught up in the obligations in what do other people need from me and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think I always encourage people like some form of artistic expression, creative expression, and there's so many
Mm,
avenues now. I feel like we should do it because that is creativity is one field I feel like no one can master. You're always going to learn something new, whether it's comedy, music, visual arts, poetry, writing stories, whatever it is, there's always something you can learn because there's somebody out there who maybe is not the most famous, but I'm sure they've had an idea you haven't thought of.
absolutely. It's the purest form of divinity, being one with that
Yeah.
universal intelligence that is
Yes.
pure creativity. And when we connect with
Yes.
that, man, that's when we're at our best. That's when we're blissful. That's when we're feeling on purpose, and there's nothing like it. And that's one of the things we've talked about in previous episodes. Like, creativity is not just something that's nice to have, a hobby on the
Yeah.
side, but I think it's an essential part of human
Yes.
health. And
Yeah.
even writing, even just like journaling, can be a really like cathartic, creative process. And I just strongly encourage everybody to have some form of creative release, because that catharsis, that deep emotional healing that takes place through any form of creativity is essential part of health.
Absolutely. And I really like what you said of like that divine connection. I really do. Like, we always talk about where creativity comes from, and no one really has an idea. And like, everyone's like, oh, I do this and I just be creative. And it's like that. I really agree with you. It does feel like that divine connection to the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The small self kind of disappears, and that's when you're just one with the
Yes.
wholeness of existence, and it's
Absolutely.
it's just pure joy.
Yeah, yeah, man, that's such a great point, because I think that's what made me feel and still feel so present when I'm playing music. You don't, like, a lot of your anxiety and overthinking of everything else really goes away.
Hmm.
Not only because you have to focus on the technical part of it, but you also, like you said, you start feeling that groove, and it's
Oh yeah.
just a flow.
Pure magic. Well said, Christian. Thank you.
Thank you.
It has been an absolute pleasure talking with you. I wish you the absolute best in your career endeavors, with Synchrony, and with your music, and would love to jam with you sometime down the
Absolutely.
road. I'm sure our audience would love to see that, a video in the future of us jamming. That would be great. So
Yeah,
how does that
awesome.
sound to you?
That sounds awesome, man. That'd be
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for coming on. You've been an amazing guest, and inspired me in a lot of ways, and I'm sure many of our viewers as well. So thank you so much.
Of course, man. Thank you for having me, Patrick. I really, like you said, those lift rides are such a great cultivation for conversation. And talking to you that day was a great spiritual conversation. It really helped me to just appreciate again people. Meeting you has was a great moment. I appreciate that.
Likewise, likewise, my friend.
Absolutely, brother.
Have a great rest of your day, and let's talk soon. All
Yeah, man. We'll talk a little.
right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Everyday Gurus. We invite you to donate to Mitchell's Legacy, our guest today, and Everyday Gurus to support us. The link is gofundme.com/everydaygurus. Thank you so much.